wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's been a lot of fun. I flew out from the Rockies out west in the United States, and so I'm just getting over the jet lag, which means, of course, it's time to go home. I work, though, at a center in Pittsburgh called the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center. It's a joint institute between Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. And so we're a supercomputing center. What does that mean? In the 80s, the NSF needed to provide really fast computers for physicists who wanted to model things. And we were one of the founding centers of that program almost 40 years ago. And ever since then, we've been this center that has done a lot of things, but the core of what we did was provide for the national research community supercomputing resources and help using them to enable science. And it's grown beyond physics since then, of course, to everything that we see happening today. But that has been the bread and butter. And then, 8 years ago, my colleague Alex Ropoleski at PSC won an award to become the primary image repository for the Brain Initiative. And so he called that the Brain Imaging Library. And a year later, my colleague Jonathan Silverstein and I were awarded the award for running the infrastructure for this new program, HuBMAP, in the Common Fund. And then a couple years after that, we also won the award for the Cellular Senescence Network, another Common Fund program. And so suddenly what had been mostly a focus on sort of the NSF research community became a big focus on data infrastructure at PSC. And so as we did this, we were trying to think, how could we leverage what we have at the supercomputing center to benefit these projects and maybe do some things a little differently by leveraging some of the things that we had on hand. These two projects are very closely related in terms of the technologies that we're supporting and the kind of science. Although HuBMAP, as some of you may know, or Human Biomolecular Atlas program, is focused on building maps of healthy human tissues across all the organs we can. And it seems like they tried to throw at us every technology they could as well. And so we have everything, and it's a lot of large data, a lot of imaging, and cutting edge things, a lot of spatial transcriptomics and proteomics now coming in at the very end of our funding. We're in our last funding year, so it makes this topic very pertinent to us. So you'll see I have a few strong feelings about that. So SenNet, very much same technologies, but there's probably about 40 or more different technologies that we're supporting across these two centers. So really important to figure out how to do this as efficiently as possible, which means we're only terribly slow at getting all these things done, but this is how it goes. So the theme here was on innovation and sustainability and the tension between these two and how do we navigate that. And from the beginning, we called our application Flexible Hybrid Cloud. And so we really leaned into the flexibility as a way to help mitigate some of the challenges that we come across by giving ourselves more options, more knobs to turn and dials and such to optimize for both of these things. And also, as I'll talk about a little bit more later on, it also gives us an opportunity to sort of shift modes as we approach maybe, we're not going to have as much funding, in a year from now as we do now to run these things. And so we can make some adjustments there, and we have some options to how we move things around to be more sustainable and maybe go into a little bit of sustainability mode until the funding maybe increases again, and then move back into innovation mode. So here is a few things that came to my mind, and this is not an exhaustive list, and we've heard a few of these things by now in this session, of course. But the big one for us was doing the hybrid cloud. And so we have all these on-prem resources at PSC. We have strength of scale there with the center. We have multiple data projects running at the same time. We've got the supercomputers for the computation. And so it just made a lot of sense. And we've done big data at the center for a long time, just not quite in this space until 8 years ago. So it made a lot of sense for us to keep the data and to keep the computing on-prem. But then, of course, there's still a lot of strengths in cloud, and as we want to leverage those too. And so I guess we're following what the shift in the government going from sort of cloud first to cloud smart. And that's what it is, just leveraging the strengths of both of those things. We try to do things in a modular way, make it easier to maintain and modify, and also make it easy to integrate with what we have and to find and access the things we have. So a lot of the things we've heard in this session, so containerized things, reproducible workflows, good APIs, knowledge graphs that can span and knowledge across these different groups, and not just within our centers, but across HuBMAP and SenNet and all the common fund data ecosystem and beyond. And making it easy to get at the raw data and such when that's what people want to do. So also just being as vanilla as possible, and making things that can run anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's on-prem or in the cloud. Try not to buy into too many specialized solutions on that front, and then reusing the things that we build. And it made it nice for us that we got 2 closely related awards, because we're able to re-implement, or basically reuse everything that we, not re-implement, but reuse everything that we built in HuBMAP for SenNet when that came along a couple of years later. So this is the diagram. Is kind of, you're not gonna be able to read maybe all those things on there, and you don't have to, just follow the colors. So we're talking about hybrid. Everything in blue is on-prem at PSC. Everything in orange there is in the cloud, and we use AWS. So really, as I said, it's the really expensive stuff, and also the stuff we do really well on-prem, and we can do very, very, very cost efficiently there. It's the large data and all the computing. We do a lot of processing of data. And a nice thing about having the supercomputer sitting there is that although we have some small amount, we can be very frugal with how much dedicated hardware we bought for HuBMAP. And we have a small amount of that, but then that's sort of our day-to-day things. But then when we have a big push, we can burst to our own internal on-prem cloud, our supercomputer, and run a bunch of things there. And I'll talk a little bit about why we can reuse it that way for this project. Also, it gives us the opportunity to also move things back. So if in the future, when we don't have the funding to pay for cloud services, we could support all of it on-prem if we wanted to. We haven't done that yet, but we have. SenNet was written as a cloud-first proposal. We could not propose on-prem solutions for SenNet, so we proposed it as all cloud, and then we convinced them that they should go hybrid, and we did. But for a while, it was everything we had implemented hybrid on HuBMAP was implemented just in AWS. It was all in the cloud for the first couple of years of SenNet. Okay. So then going down my list of sort of things here in the context of what we did with HuBMAP, everything there is we're trying to make it as modular as we can. It's all deployed as microservices in Docker containers. And then, so that's what we do to build our own stuff. The portal itself, the data portal, is just another app, built on the APIs and resources as a microservice itself, although it's one of the less micro ones, of course. And then if others want to contribute tools, and so this is sort of the innovation side, if there's new things that need to be deployed or updated, some of the processing pipelines and those kind of things, we have actually our technology center in HuBMAP. They did this crazy experiment of having originally 5, now 6 different teams doing the technology. And so there's a lot of coordination, throwing things over the fence at each other. And so having this kind of, really straightforward way to integrate, just put it in a Docker container. If it's a workflow, put it in common workflow language, and it will just integrate. And so that's how, for example, one of the killer apps from HuBMAP is Azimuth from Rahul Satij's lab. That has, I think, 30,000 citations or something. So very, very important app for us. And they just released their pan-organ reference. So they used to do organs. They do annotation of cell types, which is very important for us in both HuBMAP and SenNet. And so they did that organ by organ for a while. And now they've released a reference that can annotate any tissue in the human body. So that will be really important for us. And we're now updating that to be able to be at the cutting edge on that front. Okay, so I mentioned, we have knowledge graphs. So there's a universal biomedical knowledge graph that Jonathan Silverstein devised. That's really cool. You should talk to him about it if you want to talk. I'm not the expert in that, but it's a way to bridge ontologies and and knowledge across many different things you can bring together. Basically, choose what ontology you want to work with, bring it all in one place, and be able to do search across all those things. We're also, as I said, just very much deploying everything in a standard way so that we can run it anywhere we want, on-prem or in the cloud. All right. So the other thing that has benefited us is looking at benefiting from economies of scale and synergies in our funding, and where can we bring these things together and build some critical mass, because different sources of funding come on and leave at different times, and are there opportunities to find common interest, align with common goals across different funding agencies and different opportunities that we see out there. So this is where, again, our position as a national supercomputing center has come into play. So this is just a reminder, we've been around for 40 years. Those are some of the systems we put down at that time. But there's always been an overarching NSF program to allocate access to these systems. And so this is getting back to how we use our own supercomputer for HuBMAP. So these resources, for those who aren't familiar, are available to anyone who wants to do open science. And so that includes people who are running the HuBMAP program. It happens to be us, but it doesn't matter. We go to through the NSF Access program. We apply for time there, just like any other scientist can. I think it does have to be a US PI who's the principal PI on an NSF Access allocation, but then international collaborators are welcome there. So really anyone in the world can use these resources. Almost anyone in the world can use these resources for open science. So that includes us as HuBMAP and SenNet people. So we just do the same thing that anyone else would do. We can get an allocation on our own supercomputer, and we can burst and run our jobs on that system. So our flagship system is called Bridges 2. We're in Pittsburgh. There's lots of bridges. So further opportunity that came out of this, of course, is that in the NSF space, with all of the applications of AI and in the rest of science that's not biomedical focused, there's a big need for sharing data and making data available broadly. And so as part of the leadership class computing facility that NSF is building, now this is like a $500 million system. Okay, so this is not being built fully at PSC. In fact, our part of it is relatively small, but our part in this is to have a distributed data repository that's connected to this leadership class computing facility, and build a small 30 petabyte storage system there to host all kinds of valuable data. And they want data like the data we're generating in HuBMAP and in SenNet and a lot of these other projects. And so we'll have the opportunity as being partners in this system to build that repository, and we have a home for HuBMAP after the end of this year. When the funding goes away, we can bring it all back on-prem, back to PSC. And so that's how we designed to be able to do it from the beginning. And this opportunity came, somewhat intentionally, somewhat fortuitously. We're able to take advantage of that to put us in a strong position to sustain HuBMAP for the future. How are we doing on time here? Okay. So now this was a key when we went to publish. It's kind of a fun story for me. Because I was involved in it at the time, and it wasn't so fun when we were in these discussions back and forth. But we're in 2023, we had a big package of papers that all the scientists in HuBMAP had generated that was going to be published, or they were trying to publish in Nature as a big package. And so Nature said, great, well, all this data you put in this other portal, you need to put in repositories that we approve. And we said, wait a minute, this is where we're putting our data. Like, it's a lot of data. And they said, well, you have to follow all these things. And so basically, because of what I just described, we were able to commit to Nature that we would maintain the data for at least 10 years after the end of HuBMAP, regardless of what the funding situation was like, as far as direct funding for it. So that was our commitment, and we'll be able to stick with that. The degree, how amazing the portal is and that sort of thing, that will definitely depend on how much funding we have, but the data will be available and accessible with DOIs and so forth for at least 10 years after the end. So there's opportunities in this area maybe for all of us. I think AI could be a big driver of opportunity for those who are generating valuable data, and especially well annotated data. And I know in the Common Fund data ecosystem, they're pushing hard to say it's, make it as AI ready as possible. And so, there's an opportunity for those who have these high quality data to, I think, have some funding opportunities come your way to be able to sustain these products. So one of these is this National AI Research Resource. This is a multi-agency effort. So that's another positive here is I think it's being led by the NSF, but all of these different agencies in the government have a role in it. And so hopefully, it's in a pilot phase right now. But something like this, I feel like has got to happen, whether it's this particular one or whether they decide they're going to shift gears and do something a little different. There's going to be opportunities for people with high quality data to seek additional funding sources to sustain that. And then I think there's also an opportunity for the funding agencies to make that easier for us to do. And I was really happy when we had the revised data management sharing plan from NIH that gives very specific direction for making money from the grant available for things like data curation and depositing data in repositories. And so we can look at that as as HuBMAP and talk to folks and say, does this make sense to pay part of your grant money towards the data deposition, which is what you do if you put it in Dryad or Figshare or Zenodo or any of these other places. But maybe we can do a little bit better if you're doing spatial transcriptomics data or some things like that. So I actually had a researcher reach out to me and say, hey, my review panel said I should put my data in HuBMAP. And we have a bunch of Xenium data, and how can we do that? Right now, we're just taking data from HuBMAP consortium members, but the future, sort of extending this into the future, we would definitely want to open this up to the broader scientific community. And so it's nice to know that at least one lab would be willing to put some of their grant money towards that they put aside in their data management plans. So that is, those are some of my thoughts in my 15 minutes or 20 minutes here. I hope you'll come and visit our site, and I welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'm deliberately not going to ask how much it would cost to store 30 petabytes in AWS, but I wonder if the audience have got any questions.
Thank you. This is really, really nice work. I have so many questions for you, but I'll ask one.
Okay.
You mentioned when you were doing your design for hybrid, you have a high availability side and you have your on-prem side. I'm exactly in the same place of designing one of these myself. So did you have a hard and fast rule of what should be considered high availability, what should be always on, so you can make that decision?
Yeah, so I think we worked more of it from the on-prem side, like here's what definitely has to be on-prem. and then it was sort of a default to, well, everything else can go in AWS because it's just the cost of us maintaining it is probably going to be higher than what we would pay in AWS for some of the things, and or we just don't want to bother with that. So I will say that in our case, it worked out really nicely in that, and we talked with our program officers of how many 9s do you want this to be, right? And they said not very many. We can't afford that, but what happens in practice with the HuBMAP portal right now is that, so yes, our research infrastructure is not going to be as many 9s as Amazon. And so when some terrible weather comes through Pittsburgh, then there will be an outage, but the portal will remain up. All the metadata will stay there. The only thing that you can't do is get the actual data behind the scenes. So anything that's not, so the data that's living at PSC you won't be able to get, but as long as you don't try to go download some data, maybe there's some visualizations that may rely on pulling some assets there too. But you can still do a lot with the portal, with everything in Pittsburgh down. So that's that was a nice division and sort of a middle ground, between that and them giving us 10 times the money that we were getting.
It's a great talk. I have lots of questions. And firstly, thank you because you are doing the morphic data processing.
Yes.
So we are under the others list. I'm curious about whether cloud first is ever cheaper in the long run, because that has not been my experience.
Well, ever is, you know, a very inclusive word. I'm sure there's some circumstances, and you know, if I was a cloud representative here, I would talk about all the ways we can make your life easier and help save costs and optimize. And there is a lot of optimization that can be done, and you do have to be motivated to do it, though.
I mean, we're motivated, but we can spend so much time optimizing and actually training the personnel to do the optimization, to think about that in the design and then iterate over the design. Actually, when we stack that up against our local storage, particularly the storage, because we don't need so much compute, but we've got not close to half an exabyte, it becomes very challenging to make cloud work for anything other than front end, basically.
You have half an exabyte.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Close to.
Yep. That's tough.
Time for one more question.
Actually, I don't have questions, I have comments. So did you reach out to AWS for their open data program? So they have open data program, they are willing to provide free storage for high value data set. So actually sequence read archive is very huge. Data part of this hosted Amazon open data program is storage is free.
Yeah, and you know, we should do that. Not that we're not going to keep it on-prem, but we should do that in addition to keeping it on-prem. But I love having it on-prem because then we can send it wherever we want. So if HuBMAP ends, you know, if we end or whatever, the data can go wherever, and we're not going to pay egress, you know, to get it out of different things. So we can send it anywhere as it is. We can send it up, some of it to the cloud now, and have people compute on it there. If we can get it free in the cloud too, that's even better.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Thanks.
Obviously, lots of shared